Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of these little guys right here. These are two examples of the Alliance Designs Mini Slim Pickins. First off, though, in the name of full disclosure, I want to let you know that these guys were both sent my way by the manufacturer as loans. Alliance, I reached out to them actually after I saw pictures of these guys on the web. I was like, whoa, that's pretty. Mind if I check out one of those Alliance? And I think I actually said, you don't need to send one of like the full dress ones or anything, but I'd just like to see the design. They went ahead and did that. But nonetheless, I want to thank them very much for sending these guys along. I told them, as always, I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. Might be gems, might be junk. They still did send them along. We do have to assume, though, that these are the very best quality controlled ones of these ever. And I'm doing my best not to let any of that affect the nature or quality of my review. Next thing, let's do some size comparison. I'll use the Copperhead version of this guy here. First, here we are against the Spyderco Ontario Rat number 2. Sorry, crashed for a second there. Ontario Rat number 2. Here it is against the Spyderco Delica. Here it is against the Spyderco Paramilitary 2. And then what we're seeing here actually is that this is not a super thin knife, but it is a relatively compact one, right? If we close this guy up, what we see here is, yeah, it's not too big. So that's definitely a thing. And then actually, here it is against one other knife that is sort of another hot button lock at the moment. That is the Pocketknife's Malibu. This is one of the titanium versions, but still, absolutely a beautiful thing, and sort of the closest analog that's really on the market at the moment. Next thing, there are a couple of different, actually, there are a ton of different variants of this particular knife. The base model, which is just titanium and has an Elmax blade, is $355. The Copperhead, which is this guy right here, is $420. The half-dress model, which is this guy, featuring the Zircon thigh as well as the Damascus over here, is going to be $1,095, $1,095, that is. And there is a full dress model at about $1,400 that is Damascus throughout. All of those guys are, so they've got a whole bunch of different options in terms of price point. So let's anyways go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting knife. First off, one thing I'll say is I appreciate that this is a more reasonably sized model, right? Alliance is a company I've been kind of following for a while now. They've been on the scene for a little while. They're one of those companies that works with designers as well as with overseas factories to bring together basically good designs, good making, etc. And they've been doing a bunch of different models, and they've got a bunch of other models right out too. For instance, this is one from CMF Blade Works. But anyways, they've got a bunch of these different things out there. But I saw the original Slim Pickins out at a show at one point in time, way back in the day when shows were a thing, and it was huge, right? It was a big, beefy, nothing slim about it sort of knife. See, in the Mini, yeah, this is the size I feel like works a little bit better. Certainly, I'm going to be a little bit biased, but that's a thing. And I think this size works very well. It's uncontroversially under 3 inches, making it legally a much better option for a lot of people. And just frankly, I think it's a nice size, generally speaking. So I appreciate that they've gone ahead and they've made the Mini model, because I think that's the thing that a lot of folks should be thinking about. Next thing, this has a second detent. If you watch the disassembly, and I really think you should, you'll see not only that there is a second detent under there, basically alongside the detent that is naturally coming from the button lock, involved with popping that little bit up out, there is a second bar, basically, and it's a little tiny lock bar with a ceramic ball in the end of it that goes into a hole in the blade and then presses, and so that's one of the things keeping this guy closed. It has a couple of meaningful points. A, it means that even with the blade open, even with the button down, you're not getting that blade up out of there, which legally speaking could actually be important to you, but also is practically important given that the button is protruding a little bit. This means that even if you accidentally press the button in your pocket, you're probably not going to deploy the knife, which is good. It also means that on the close, actually it's a little smoother to do it on this guy here, we'll talk about why later, the blade does not pop back open, as very often is the case with a button lock style knife. There's that second jump in there. So that can be a very nice thing. But the most important thing, I think, is that it's removable. And if you remove that ball, you end up with something that is very, very different. It is much more of a classical free-dropping button-locky action, like this kind of thing, like the Protect Malibu over here. Mind you, you'll want to talk to your lawyer before you do something like that, as well as, it's going to have the downside of, like I said, you press the button, knife falls open in your pocket as well, but it's very nice that you have the option to remove it, and you have the option to put it back in with no consequence either. So I appreciate that very much, and I think they did a really good job designing that. Next thing, both sides of this are nice. The reason I bring that up is that so very often you end up with knives that have beautiful inlays on on one side, or beautiful figuring on the show side, and then the clip side is just like titanium. There's not much going on there. Whereas on this guy, both sides are beautiful. They've got the same details on both sides, including the pivot collar, including the scales. All of those things are present on both sides, and I like that very much. Next thing, action on these guys is good to go. Sitting here, no wrist at all. Deploys 100% reliably, no problem. Same thing over here. Oh, yeah, no problem. Both of these, by the way, do have the secondary detent installed. So, you know, do consider that as we're thinking about action here. And the close on both of these is very smooth as well. Very straightforward to do. No problems there. And frankly, the flipper tab on these is nice, too, because it's very subtle, right? It's not one of the big old pocket peckers that's going to be pecking on whatever's in your pocket all day long. No, this is a very subtle flipper tab, but it's extremely effective because it's got this very nice little jimping in here, as well as just a detent that's dialed in well for it. This is really excellent in action. Next thing, it's a button lock, and you know what? I like those. They're nice. We should see more of that, because one of the nice things about it is that they become ambidextrous, although this knife, by the way, does not have a drilling for an opposite side clip, which is something to consider. But it is a much more ambidextrous locking style, and as well as just your fingers are never anywhere in the blade path, it's very easy to take this guy out one-handed, use it, and then close it back up one-handed. Button locks just offer a lot of joy, basically, a lot of benefits. Next thing, blades on these guys. So, like I said, this guy, LMAX steel. LMAX is a fine steel. It's good to go. You know, heat treated well, absolutely no problems with it. So the LMAX, I'm sorry, when it is heat treated well, I have not evaluated the heat treat properly here. Again, jackass, not metallurgist, but still, I have no reason to believe it would be otherwise. But the LMAX is absolutely fine, and it actually has a reasonably thin grind. Even though the stock is a little on the thicker side, it comes down to a very thin edge here. Well, to a reasonably thin edge. It's not like, oh my God, the sliciest, thinnest thing ever, but at the same time, it works. It cuts very, very well. And so I appreciate that very much, and the blades are very well finished. This guy, by the way, is what appears to be a Damasteel, or at the very least, a strong I think this is Damasteel brand, but it is a Damascus-style steel, at the very least, and is just quite good. This looks excellent. So I appreciate very, very much the steel here. It is worth noting, by the way, that a Damascus-style steel blade, let me just look this up real quick. I'm feeling weird because I will eat my hat if that's not Damasteel brand. After a while in this game, you start to get a pretty good sense of what different kinds of Damascus look like, what the different makers end up doing. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that this is Damasteel here. Come here, website. Let's see here. Damasteel blade. Yep. Okay, cool. So Damasteel is a powder metallurgy steel that is combining two different grades, both of which are good to go for everyday carry, to get something that is stainless and beautiful. So, but it is worth noting, actually, that these two blades are not necessarily going to be equivalent in cutting performance. It's not the case that Damasteel is a better performer for your everyday life. If you're going to be cutting cardboard all day long, A, really, this? And B, you know, that's something to keep in mind. But still, nonetheless, steels on these guys are good to go. I digressed. Anyways, next thing, details. The details are here. And I'm going to go ahead and I can show on both of these, but I'll go ahead and I'll show on the full dress because I think that's a little, I'm sorry, the half dress. It's a little bit more reasonable. But there were a bunch of nice details here. To start with, the inlay screws here are T8. And I appreciate that so very, very much, right? It's so often these things are using little tiny screws. That's nice. The fact that you got T8 is there, too, is nice, too. You can see here that not only do we have a nice Zircutai pivot collar, and by the way, this is Zircutai. Zircutai is a type of basically metal where they have combined titanium here with zirconium. And so you get these layers of zirconium, the darker black metal, combined with actual titanium in there in different grades as well. And so you end up with this beautiful contrasting pattern here, which is great. And we see the Zircutai and the pivots around as well. We see the pivot itself, although this is just a Torx screw in the middle of it there, and it disassembles just fine. We see what looks to be nice sort of pivot hardware there. That's a beautiful thing. I appreciate very much the fact that the backspacer is just well done here. It's pretty simple, but it works well, and it gives some nice jimping. It gives some nice traction here. That's very nice. I appreciate very much the clip. The clip on this guy is actually quite nice. It's a milled clip, but it fits the overall design. It makes the knife hang pretty well in the pocket. I might have wanted a little bit more canting so that the clip, the knife hangs a little bit more to the side there, but it's absolutely good to go. You see these very nice chamfers all throughout the side of it, and this is almost a roundover. I mean, chamfer, roundover, whatever. But we see here that this has this very nice contouring here, which makes this just fit better in the hand. As does the clip, by the way, which comes down almost flush with the knife itself. And then you even get like a very nice contour on the bolster here. If we look at the bolster here, if we take a ruler, we see that this isn't actually a straight cut at all. What we have here is a little bit of round. We have a little bit of going that way and a little bit of going down that way. I appreciate that very much because honestly, and it's even more apparent if you look at it from this end, it just looks good. It really does. And I think it adds a little bit more visual intrigue than just like slice, bam, slap on the Zircon die. And then, frankly, the materials are just excellent. These knives here are really excellently executed. The fact that this is a production knife made overseas should not overshadow the fact that this is a substantially beautifully done knife. All of the various factors here, all the fit and finish elements, all of the details are right there. I mean, the centering is right on. This is just a knife that is really good, made by anybody. But it's just excellent. You can see, by the way, the pattern of the Damascus steel in the flipper tab bottom there, which is, again, just good. So I really appreciate the fact that both of these knives, whether we're talking the fancy half-dress one or even this guy, which uses the fat carbon really, really effectively. That's the name of this material here. It's called fat carbon. It has some copper in there, along with the copper pivot surrounds. Both of these knives are just supremely well executed. The grinds are great. I am impressed. So, to me at least, all of that is the good here, is that we've got an extremely well executed knife with great details, nice blades, button locks, good action, beauty on both sides, a second detent that's actually very, very nicely done, and a more reasonably sized model than the original. To me, though, the great thing about these guys is actually that variation in trim level. They start off with a relatively basic titanium button lock, right? It's just the whole thing's titanium. The blade is Elmax. And there you go. And that at $350, probably a nice knife, right? But then you can go up. You can get something like this. And you can go up, and then you go up, and then you go up. All the way through the half-dress here, which is not their fanciest model, to a full-dress one that is a complete titanium, or, Damascus, probably Zircon die, actually. But just a beautiful, beautiful pattern all throughout the handles, all the way up to $1,400. The fact that you take this one model from a $300 basic $300 basic knife. Wow, perspective. From $350 and up, all the way up to the high end, and it feels like it's plausible at any of those price points. It's well done at any of those price points. That is beautiful. I love very much having that gradient from production knife all the way up to what feels like a full-dress high-end custom within one line, and it gives fans a really great way to really appreciate a knife that they've come to love. So to me, what is great here is that gradient, the fact that they go from basic all the way up to completely bougie and do it well. So there's the great. On the bad side, to start with, mathematically speaking, I feel like this is probably closer to 4/5 dress, right? Because all this is dress. This is the only non-dressy part, and even then, that's a little dressy, right, guys? I'm not buying the whole half thing. And it's symmetrical, so, well, okay, the clip maybe. Look, I'm not going to sit here and calculate areas, but this ain't half, okay? Next thing, base model on this guy, $350 for a titanium button lock and Elmax. A little bit pricier maybe than you might expect. There were some other pieces out there that are titanium bolster locks and similar steels that are a little cheaper than that. I'm not gonna, break them there, but at the same time, I gotta say it really feels like the $450 range is where this is most comfortable. Like this copperhead is quite good. It is quite an exceptionally well done piece, and I can't imagine, especially having handled the full-tie slim Pickins way back when. I think that this is probably where you want to start rather than going down that lower end. It's fine. It's good knife, but I would probably say that this is where you start getting a little bit more in the way of value there. And by the way, LMAX is one of those steels that gets a little less impressive as you go up in the price range. So, that's something they're going to want to consider as they're continuing to do this in future models. Next thing, these guys didn't come blindingly sharp. They came sharp enough. They're okay. But certainly, actually, this guy did not. Stropping this guy up made a big difference. And by the way, one of the nice things about Damasteel is it strops beautifully. Oh my God, does this stuff strop up to just a beautiful edge. But this is a nitpick, but at a grand, you nitpick, right? They have earned the nitpick in there. Next thing, this is a very shallow carry. This knife carries with about that much of the knife sticking out of the pocket there. Mind you, it's a pretty attractive chunk of knife to have sticking out of the pocket, but it is definitely not a shallow carry. I'm sorry, not a deep carry. Keep that in mind. Next thing, the secondary detent definitely does slow the action down. When I first got this, actually, I said to the Alliance guy, I said, hey, nice knife, but I think it must be running on earwax because the action was so slow for a button lock. There are so many button locks out there, like the Malibu here, that are absolutely just fall shutty, whereas these guys maybe not as much. And especially this guy, because we see here it actually has a different, it has a satin finish on the hand satin or hand rub or something like that on the flat of the knife. And as a result, you feel that detent kind of scraping along there. Over time, that will wear in because it's a ceramic detent ball, right? It will wear in a path. But right now, it ends up being a lot slower than you might expect. And actually, this is less of an issue on the high-end one, partly because, look, these are polished, right? It doesn't look it, but this is a high-ish polish on this Damasteel here. And as a result, the secondary detent ball is smooth. Well, it's over a smoother surface. So I appreciate that very much. This one definitely has a nicer drop shuttier action, but both of them are a little slower due to that secondary detent. Take it out if you wanted to, but it's definitely a factor there. Next thing, this definitely, there is a little tiny bit of stick on the high-end one. This has been getting lesser and lesser as I've carried it more and more, and I suspect it will disappear entirely over time, as is often the case with button locks, but at the same time, there is a little tiny bit of stick there, and that's something they want to keep an eye on. Next thing, these are both very heavy knives. What we have here are big old chunks of, in this case, titanium and carbon fiber, and in this case, zirconium, which takes the well-known weight of zirc and adds it to the titanium here. So if we measure out this guy, we come up at 4.17 ounces for about a little bit less than 3 inches of blade there. And this guy comes into a full-on, 5 ounces for a little less than 3 inches of blade. These are chunky boys. They're called the Slim Pickins, but there ain't nothing slim here. Actually, by the way, it's worth noting, these are not particularly slim knives. If we do a thickness comparison here against the Delica, yeah, it's a thick one. But anyways, nonetheless, these are a little on the heavy side, and especially this guy with the zirconium is a little heavier. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more in the way of scalloping on the inside of this guy. I understand that's probably very difficult when you've got the bolsters already, and zirconium is a heavy material, right? So, who am I? But still, it's a little on the heavier side. Next thing, both of these guys could use a little bit of a recess around the button. If we look closely at the ProTech Malibu here, we see that there is a little cutout, meaning that the button is actually just about flush with the outside of the knife. What this means is that if I just press this guy down against a table or something like that, or if I put this in my pocket, there's not really a good chance that something's going to press the button. Whereas if we look at this guy, very, very different. Here, the button is sticking out pretty substantially on a variety of angles. It's a little smoother on this side, and it's not, to the point where I would call it outright dangerous, but at the same time, this is definitely sticking out there. And so I kind of wish that they had recessed the button down a little bit deeper and then made a little bit of a pocket in the titanium to get to it. That's one of those things that's a little detail, but it is a nice little safety feature. And although I can see the cleanness of doing it this way, that would have been an improvement here. So I hope that they can do that in a future version. Then, but by the way, it is worth noting, though, that during use, that's not a concern. Because as I'm holding this guy in a saber grip, even if I choke up a little bit, which, by the way, is still comfortable, because they've got this little flat area here, I'm not at any risk of touching the button. Lefties might have a little bit more problems, but even still, it's in a good position here, so I don't see that as a factor, but it is still something they might want to consider. And then finally, on the last issue here is that this back corner here on both of these guys is a little bit on the sharp side. If they just kind of melted this back corner a little bit more, I think it would be a little bit nicer overall. This is only really a factor as you're flipping it, but there you're going to feel it digging into your hand right about there. So to me, all of that is the bad, and I'm nitpicking pretty hard here, but that it's got a point at the back corner here. Could use a little bit of a recess around the button. It's a little stick on the higher end one. The second detent does slow the action a little bit. They carry pretty shallowly. Didn't come amazingly sharp. The base model's a little bit pricey, and mathematically speaking, this is 3/4 dress, maybe 4/5. Anyways, on the ugly front, honestly, there's nothing ugly here. So let's go to the final conclusion, which is that, wow. Honestly, these are nice. I did not expect this. I figured I'd be getting these guys, and honestly, I just figured I'd be getting one of the plain titanium ones, but still, ooh. These are good. They've got a really nice double detent approach. They've got fancy that is symmetrical, a nice action, a nice button lock, nice blades, stellar details, excellent execution, and a product line that goes all the way from pretty bare bones to complete full dress. It's a little pricey. The carry's shallow, the action's a little slow out of the box. There's a touch of stick on this guy. They were a little heavy. The buttons could use a recess, and this corner could use a little editing, but these are profoundly nice. And honestly, it's a breath of fresh air from Alliance. I've liked some of their past stuff, for sure, but it's often felt a little bit like they lacked a little bit of polish, a little bit of editing, and they needed to up the the attention to details generally. In some cases, they were a little too faithful to customs with some flaws. In other cases, it was just a little weird, right? But these do not have that problem. This is polished, this is edited, and the details are 100% there. This is their first in-house design, and wow, whoever their in-house designer is good. Holy crap. And so this adds up to these knives being gems. And more importantly, these are knives, and specifically this guy here, the half-dress, is one of those knives that makes the custom versus production debate get really dicey very quickly, right? This knife is basically a high-end custom knife. It is spectacularly well made, but it's priced where a lot of custom knives start. Let alone for a full dress or a half dress, whatever that is, sort of model. If I were to find this exact knife, cover up the logo, I were to find this exact knife sitting on some random jackass's table at a show, and this were the table price, I would be shouting about this maker from the rooftops, and I suspect many of you would be too. Yet I can already envision a throng of people telling me I would never pay that much money for a production knife. Now look, that's a feeling you're welcome to have for whatever reason you've got it, and budgets will vary. But I maintain that in terms of knife making, this knife here is very, very hard to distinguish from high-end custom pieces from many makers. There are custom makers, certainly, who will match and beat this kind of a standard, but they are very few and far between. You will be justifiably paying for individual time and care. And we should, of course, never be reluctant to pay more money to support individual artists and their livelihoods. But availability with those makers tends to be a major problem. It's like, oh yeah, they do amazing work. Can I get one? No, but you can get on their books and maybe in 28 years you'll get a chance? Like, no, that's a problem. Or you can pay $1 bazillion from this reseller. Look, the fact that this kind of quality is available to people from I could go on Artisan's website right now and click buy and get a full dress one of these, that is beautiful. That is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So the existence of gear like this is good, both in that it gives an option to somebody who might like the aesthetics of a custom high-end knife, as well as something that's very much in the quality domain, but wants something that they could actually just go to a website and click buy on, and maybe, just maybe, even afford. Because this guy from a high-end maker could easily be $2 or $3 grand, right? This is serious business here. So I very much hope that they continue doing this, because it's also raising the bar a little bit for what's possible in terms of materials, in terms of excellence there. And they did use great materials here. This is Chad Nichols Zircuti. They're doing the absolute best here. And so I hope Alliance continues to do this, making custom quality materials and aesthetics more available, both to give people in the community some options, as well as to highlight the true masters of custom knife making who are able to go above and beyond an already high bar that's set by knives like this. I am super impressed. You can probably tell that. And in fact, I now own this knife. This knife is now a part of my collection. And the copperhead is actually heading to a good friend, right? But it's just like, at a certain point, I contacted Alliance and said, now look, guys, How can I hold on to these without committing mail fraud on the return shipment? They gave me a price, I paid them. That's a beautiful thing. It is a chunk of change, absolutely. But these are excellent, excellent knives. And they're knives I can appreciate both as a collector and somebody who appreciates a really high-end work, as well as somebody who's watching the industry more generally and is very interested in the continued progression of production knives into territory that long would have been held by the custom world. So if you are looking for a good button lock and you're looking for high-end details, even in their mid-range stuff, then watching this review, I think you might find the Pickins are a little bit less slim than you thought. Mini. Anyways, there you go. Hope this has been interesting to you. Alliance, well done. Keep up the good work and have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.